There is a place on a woman's body that communicates more honestly than anything she could put into words. And the moment she genuinely allows you into that space, something has already shifted inside her. Something real and deep and entirely unspoken. This is not about a technique or a tactic. Stay with me because what we are going to explore here will permanently change how you understand the unspoken conversation happening in every interaction you have with a woman. Take a breath and slow down for a moment because the subject we are covering today is not surface level. It is not about memorizing what to say or following a sequence of steps. It is about something far more fundamental. It is about learning to understand the language a woman's body speaks when her words are not quite telling the full story. This silent language is present in every single interaction. Most men move through it completely unaware, not because they lack intelligence or care, but because nobody ever showed them how to pay attention to it. Consider this. Have you ever walked away from a conversation with a woman and felt genuinely uncertain about where you stood? You thought perhaps something was there, but you could not be sure. Or the opposite, she was perfectly pleasant, but something beneath the surface felt slightly off, and you could not put your finger on why. That uncertainty you carried home was not the result of poor effort. It came from missing signals that were present the entire time. Signals that were more honest than anything said out loud. Once you begin to see them, the confusion dissolves. Here is what most people quietly understand but rarely say directly. Attraction is almost never announced in clear language. It is expressed through the body and not in the obvious dramatic ways. It lives in the subtle, the instinctive, the barely perceptible. A woman's physical responses are continuously reflecting how she feels in your presence, and those responses carry a kind of honesty that words rarely can. The body does not know how to perform in the way the mind does. It simply reacts. What separates men who constantly guess from men who genuinely understand is the ability to read that deeper layer. When a woman permits a certain kind of touch, she is not simply being polite or going along with something. Her nervous system is actively processing in real time. It is asking whether she feels safe, whether she trusts you, whether your presence creates ease or creates tension, and those answers surface immediately through how her body responds. This is why two men can make the exact same gesture, reach for the same hand, stand at the same distance, and receive entirely different reactions. The action is identical. The emotional experience behind it is completely different. That is where the real distinction lives, and that is where most men are looking in the wrong direction. They are focused on the action rather than the feeling that precedes it. Picture a simple scenario. You are sitting beside a woman in a relaxed setting. The conversation is easy, maybe a little playful. At a natural moment, you lightly touch her arm while making a point. What matters is not the touch itself. What matters is the fraction of a second that follows. Does she lean almost imperceptibly toward you? Does the conversation continue without any disruption in her comfort? Does her body remain open and relaxed, or does something tighten? Does she shift even slightly, creating a breath of distance between you? Most men do not register this moment at all, but this moment is the entire conversation. Her reaction is not calculated or rehearsed. It is instinctive, and instinct does not perform. What is happening in that split second is rooted in both psychology and biology. Human beings are wired to detect intention through physical contact. Research has confirmed that we can identify emotional states such as warmth, tension, comfort, or unease through touch alone without a single word being exchanged. Women are particularly sensitive to this. A woman's nervous system is in a constant state of low-level scanning for emotional safety. This is not something she thinks about or decides to do. It simply happens. So when you make contact, she is not only registering the physical sensation, she is reading your emotional state, your groundedness, your confidence, your authenticity. If you are tense or uncertain or trying too hard, she feels that beneath the surface. If you are calm and present and genuinely at ease, she feels that too. Attraction cannot be manufactured because it operates below the level of performance. It is felt. To understand this more fully, it helps to think of a woman's body not simply as physical space, but as layers of trust. Each area represents a different depth of emotional access. Moving from one to the next is not really about physical proximity at all. It is about moving further into her sense of safety and genuine comfort with you. The outermost layer is what you might think of as socially neutral territory, the arms and the shoulders. Most interactions begin here, and many stay here. A light touch on the arm, a brief contact at the shoulder, these carry relatively little weight on their own. If she accepts them without pulling back, it tells you she is not uncomfortable in your presence, but not necessarily much more than that. Even so, information is available if you are paying attention. Is her posture open or slightly closed? Is her body angled toward you or away? Is her eye contact steady or beginning to drift? These are small signals, but they carry meaning. At this stage, she is not deciding whether she wants you. She is deciding whether she feels okay around you. That distinction matters because it is the foundation everything else is built upon. Move slightly deeper, and you arrive at the hands and the wrists. This territory begins to feel different. Holding someone's hand even briefly is not purely physical. It represents a willingness to share a moment, a form of presence that is more intimate than a casual touch. When a woman allows this, she is extending a certain level of emotional access. But the wrist is where it becomes more specific. The wrist is sensitive. It is vulnerable in a way the arm is not. People do not casually allow others into that space unless some degree of comfort has already formed. If she remains relaxed when you touch her there, if there is no subtle withdrawal, if she responds even slightly, that is a signal that her guard is beginning to ease. Not all the way, but noticeably. It is important to understand something here. The goal is never to move mechanically from one level to the next as though following a map. What you are reading for is whether she is inviting you forward. When the timing is right, that movement does not feel like progression at all. It feels like a natural continuation of something already unfolding. There is a rhythm to it, and when you are genuinely in sync with that rhythm, everything becomes easy. For those of you wondering how to develop this awareness in a practical way, here is something simple to try. In your next interaction with a woman, shift your focus away from what you are saying and direct it toward how she is physically responding, not in an anxious or analytical way, but in a grounded and observant way. Notice her breathing. Notice her posture. Notice what happens when you shift slightly closer or make light contact. Does she mirror your movement? Does her body soften? Or does she quietly create a little more distance? Those responses are your real answers. Not what she says, but what her body does. And once you begin to notice this, something changes in you as well. You stop searching for constant reassurance. You stop guessing. You start simply knowing. That quiet certainty, that settled confidence, is itself deeply attractive. Now we move into territory that most men either misread entirely or handle with the wrong energy, the waist and the lower back. This is what you might call the instinctive response zone, and the reason it matters so much is specific. This is one of the first areas where a woman cannot fully observe your approach. When you place your hand gently at her lower back while guiding her through a doorway, or when there is subtle contact at her waist as you stand close, her reaction is almost entirely unfiltered. There is no time for analysis. She simply feels it, and in that instant, her body answers a single question. Does this feel safe? Can I be at ease with him this close to me when I am not in full control of the moment? That is a psychologically significant threshold. If she tightens, shifts away, or repositions herself quickly, that is not harsh rejection. It is simply honest information. Her nervous system is communicating that the timing is not right, or that something has not yet aligned between you. But if she stays relaxed, if her body does not resist the proximity, if she leans towards you even fractionally, that is trust beginning to form at a deeper level. And here is something worth holding clearly in your mind. This has nothing to do with dominance or control. It is entirely about how your presence feels when you enter her space. A man who is grounded and emotionally present can make this exact gesture, and it registers as natural, even reassuring. A man who is uncertain, who is performing or seeking a particular outcome can do the same thing, and it feels like an intrusion. Identical action, entirely different emotional impact. She feels the difference the moment it happens. A woman once described 2 separate evenings with 2 different men. The first, by every surface measure, was doing everything right, dressed well, saying the appropriate things, projecting confidence. But when he placed his hand at her lower back, walking into a restaurant, something in her quietly tensed. She had no logical explanation for it. Her body simply did not settle. The second man was less concerned with performing. When he made the same gesture, she barely registered it consciously. Her body stayed soft. She felt at ease. Later, she described the difference this way. With the first, she felt managed. With the second, she felt safe. That distinction is everything. Deeper still is the territory of the neck and the face. There is no casual way to understand this. The neck is biologically one of the most vulnerable parts of the body. It houses the pathways we depend on for breath and pulse and life itself. When someone allows touch there, the level of instinctive trust required is significant. The face carries its own weight. It is where identity is expressed, where emotion is most visible, and where people are most naturally guarded. If a woman allows you to touch her face, to brush something aside, to hold her gently there, you are no longer in an ordinary interaction. You are in genuine emotional proximity. But the nuance here matters more than the act itself. It is not simply whether the touch occurs, it is how she receives it. Does she soften? Does her eye contact deepen and hold? Does she pause as though the moment has briefly slowed? Or does she withdraw, even barely? Her body will tell you the truth before any words could. You may be beginning to see the pattern that runs through all of this. Each level is not about increasing physical contact. It is about increasing emotional permission, and that permission cannot be manufactured, rushed, or extracted. It has to arise naturally from how she feels around you. This is why some men can study every piece of advice available and still find that nothing seems to flow, while others appear to move through these levels almost without noticing because they are not following a process. They are simply present. The quality of their presence is doing the work. Before we arrive at the final layer, consider this for a moment. Think about a time you felt genuinely connected to someone, not simply attracted, but at ease, comfortable, not needing to perform. What created that feeling? Was it something specific they said, or was it something about being in their presence? That feeling of being able to simply exist without tension, without effort, without the weight of needing to impress. That is precisely what a woman is searching for when she allows deeper closeness. And if you can create that space, not perfectly, but genuinely, you will find that you stop needing to chase signals. They begin to come to you. A practical exercise worth trying. The next time you are with a woman, instead of directing your attention toward impressing her, redirect it inward. Slow your breathing slightly. Let your shoulders drop. Be fully in the moment rather than running ahead to what comes next. Then simply observe what shifts, because when you regulate your own nervous system, you affect hers. Calm transmits. Presence creates safety, and safety is the actual foundation of attraction that endures. Now, we arrive at the final layer, the one that functions as the most honest signal of all, the hair. I understand that after everything we have built toward, that might initially seem understated. But this is precisely why it gets overlooked, and precisely why missing it means missing something significant. Hair is not simply physical. For most women, it is tied to identity, to femininity, to self-expression, and often to a quiet sense of control. It is something they touch when they are nervous, adjust when they want to feel composed, play with when they are feeling drawn to someone. It is one of the few parts of the body they are almost always managing and protecting. So, when a woman allows someone else into that space, it is not casual or incidental. It carries meaning. But the most important thing to understand here is this. It is not about reaching for her hair. It is about whether she allows it and how her body responds in that moment. Because what happens there is not a conscious decision. It is her nervous system speaking without interference. If your hand moves naturally, perhaps brushing a strand from her face, perhaps your fingers passing lightly through and she leans into it rather than away, if her head tilts slightly without any thought behind it, if her eyes soften or close briefly, if a small unguarded smile surfaces without effort, that is not politeness. That is not performance. That is every layer we have discussed aligning at the same moment. Emotional safety and physical comfort arriving together. And when that happens, her guard does not fall because she decided to lower it. It falls because there is simply nothing left for it to protect against. Let me be direct about something important because this is where misunderstanding causes real damage. This is not a move. This is not something to engineer or manufacture. The moment any of this becomes strategic, aimed at an outcome, driven by impatience or need, it loses every quality that makes it meaningful. She will feel that shift immediately because, as we have established, women do not simply feel the touch. They feel the intention underneath it. If that intention carries urgency, neediness, or agenda, her body will close off as quickly as it opened. But when it happens as a natural continuation of something genuine, when the connection is already present, when trust has formed, when your presence feels settled and safe, this moment does not feel like an escalation. It feels like the next sentence in a conversation that was already flowing. A woman once described an evening that captures this perfectly. There was no elaborate setup, no deliberate strategy, just a walk, easy conversation, and a sense of unhurried ease between two people. At one point, a strand of hair fell across her face, and the man she was with quietly moved it aside. She said what stayed with her was not the gesture, but the feeling surrounding it. There was no hesitation in him, no self-consciousness. She said it felt natural, as though he was already close to her before he even reached out. That is the quality worth understanding, not how to perform an action, but how to inhabit a presence from which moments like that occur without effort. At a deeper psychological level, when a woman responds openly to that kind of touch, it is because multiple systems have arrived at the same conclusion simultaneously. The emotional part of her brain registers safety. The instinctive part detects no threat. The relational part feels connection, and her body follows all three. This is why you will often hear women describe these experiences by saying something like, "I am not sure why, but I just felt comfortable with him immediately." That "I am not sure why" is not confusion. It is her conscious mind catching up to what her nervous system already knew. So let us bring this back to something you can actually carry with you. Stop organizing your attention around outcomes. Stop running the calculation of "how do I make her like me?" or "what should I come next?" Replace all of that with one simpler question. How does she feel in my presence right now? If the honest answer is relaxed, open, at ease, you are already moving in the right direction. If the answer is tense, uncertain, or distant, no action or technique will correct that. And this is where genuine emotional intelligence becomes the most powerful thing you can bring to any interaction. Pay attention in a grounded and present way, not in an anxious, analytical one. Feel what is happening rather than performing into it. Let moments breathe. Allow silence when it arrives naturally. Notice the small, quiet shifts because attraction lives in those spaces, not in the loud ones. Here is a thought worth sitting with. What if the goal was never to win her over, but to become someone in whose presence she naturally wants to move closer? What if instead of chasing signals, you became someone who understands them and responds in a way that feels right rather than calculated? That is where real connection begins, and it is what most people never fully learn. The truth at the center of all of this is straightforward, even if it is not always easy to accept. Touch is not strategy. It is not control. It is a conversation conducted without words. Every gesture, every response, every barely visible shift is telling a story about trust and safety and genuine emotional alignment. When you learn to read that story rather than forcing it or rewriting it, something fundamental changes. You stop guessing. You stop overthinking. You stop trying to be a version of yourself designed to impress. And you start connecting in a way that feels real for both of you. Because that underneath everything is what all of this is actually about. Not getting physically closer to her, but becoming someone she genuinely feels safe moving closer to. If this gave you something worth thinking about, share it with someone who could use this perspective. And if you want to keep exploring these ideas, stay close. There is more to uncover.